Welcome into The Bank, a show which covers the Baltimore Ravens and the NFL. The Bank is part of BSL Radio. Baltimore Sports and Life is dedicated to analysis and discussion on the Baltimore Orioles, the Ravens, and the University of Maryland. The site has a team of writers providing coverage of those teams and houses live streaming content weekly. Join the conversations at the message board, like BSL on Facebook, and follow BSL on Twitter.
Welcome to The Bank. I am Mike Randall, joined by Jamie Seek tonight. Only the two of us. Chris not joining us tonight. Jamie, how are you doing, bud?
Not too bad. How you doing tonight?
Doing good. We got a special episode for you tonight because the draft is coming up on Thursday, so you guys will probably be hearing this about Wednesday morning. We're going to be covering some of the positions of need for the Ravens pertaining to the draft, talking about wide receiver, edge rusher, offensive line. But real quick, before we get started, we'll give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Mercer Floor and Home Carpet. Mercer Floor and Home Carpet One is a third-generation family business that was established in 1959 and located on Main Street in beautiful historic downtown Westminster, Maryland, Carroll County. They're the oldest floor covering store in Carroll County and one of Maryland's longest-running flooring businesses. For all of your flooring needs, think Mercer Floor and Home Carpet One. So, Jamie, before we get into the draft stuff, the complexion of the draft has changed for the Ravens based on the trade that we heard about over the weekend. Orlando Brown going to the Kansas City Chiefs, along with our second-round pick number 58, in exchange for Kansas City's pick in the first round, number 31, third-round pick number 94, and and then two picks in 2012, exchanging a fifth and a sixth-round pick. So, real quick, Jamie, just what are your thoughts on the trade?
Well, I think there might be a little bit of a difference of opinion on the show here tonight. I like it. I like the fact that we were able to pick up additional picks because only having 7 picks in this draft, and I know that obviously the organization always focuses on having that quantity because from that quantity will come quality. But considering you had a guy who didn't want to be, not that he didn't want to be here per se, but he didn't want to play the position he was playing. You knew that if he stayed, this was going to be the last year he was going to be here. So the opportunity was there to move a player that would be very valuable in terms of a return for his ability. Obviously, he's been a Pro Bowler on the right side and then on the left side. And then for his salary for 2021 in particular, as we've discussed multiple times on the show. And I like having that, even though the second-round pick was traded away with picking up 31, you have the ability now with a lot of the guys that are in positions of need, particularly wide receiver and edge. There are a lot of those guys that kind of fall into that late first round through middle to late second round area. So you could really move back with one of those first round picks, pick up a couple of additional picks, and you can get some, quality through quantity. So all things considered, I'm sure he was shopped a lot. And I'm sure that this was the best deal that was on the table. Obviously, you have a little bit of misgivings about him going to the Chiefs, because that's the team you're chasing. But, hey, in, what was it, 1976, the O's made a big trade with the Yankees, and it ended up setting them up for, what eventually was a World Series in 1983. So sometimes you got to trade with your rival because that's the best deal that's on the table. So overall, I like it. But I think you had a little bit of it seemed like you had some misgivings about the deal. Was it the return? Was it the trade partner? Or was it a little bit of both?
Yeah, so a little bit of both for me. We talked about it on the message board at BSL. The Chiefs are the one team the Ravens just haven't been able to get past. I feel like they're number one in the AFC, and the Ravens are number 2 right now with the most to gain. Yeah, the Ravens have lost to the Bills last year in the playoffs, and they're on the come up too. But you play the Ravens and Bills 10 times, the Ravens probably win 5 of those. Bills probably win 5 of those. Maybe the Ravens might even win 6, considering the Bills' defense isn't that great. But with Kansas City, you play that game 10 times, and right now Kansas City is winning 9 of those right now. So that's not a team I wanted to help get better at the expense of their first-round pick. I'd rather them have to roll the dice with pick 31 and try to fix a hole on their offensive line, which is what we saw in the Super Bowl, was the detriment of the Chiefs.
Mm-hmm.
But that was my knee-jerk reaction to it, and having the 3 or 4 days to sit on it and stew on it a little bit, I still don't like it, but I'm not as upset about it because of the points you kind of laid out with the options the Ravens now have in the draft. They have ammunition to move back in the draft, and not, before they were picking at 27 and 58. Now they're picking at 27 and 31. They could even move back from 31 and pick a little lower, and by doing so, pick up another pick in the third round, and then be sitting there with 3 third-round picks, where they had just the one compensatory pick at number 104 earlier. So by trading back, the Ravens essentially can have 5 picks in the top 104 picks in the draft, which is really good when you think about it, if you're going for quantity, as you put it. But for quality's sake, we don't really know what those picks will pan out to be. Nobody does. That's part of the fun of the NFL, and why every season's a little bit different. You don't have the same teams making the playoffs every single year, and you have to win at the draft in order to be successful in the long term. And I feel like that's part of the Ravens' long-term success. So I trust they know what they're doing. I hope it ends up being the right move. A lot of this sounds like it hinges on Villanueva from the Steelers signing here the day after the draft, because hasn't signed yet. I don't think the Ravens want to make that deal because of compensatory pick reasons. But it seems like a lot of it hinges on that. And if he's a 1 or 2 year guy and plays at a decent level, maybe he's not going to play at the Orlando Brown level. But if he's better than replacement level, and we can use those picks to address some other needs, then I think we'll be okay. But if Orlando Brown is a Hall of Fame tackle for the next 10 years, protecting a future Hall of Famer right now,
regarding the hole that Orlando Brown will leave, and of course the discussion about Villanueva, I saw this in passing, but I didn't get a chance to follow up on it. That there was some talk that Villanueva could slide inside, and that we had a visit lined up with another veteran right tackle, but I cannot remember for the life of me who it was. Did you see that or read that anywhere?
I did not see
Okay,
that.
because I thought
there too, so I didn't see everything, but.
yeah, I think that there could be some value in if Villanueva can't play at a high level on the right side, that he still could be a piece, a bridge to someone else. And I think that's where, with this situation, because of all the guys you figure that are coming up for second contracts, obviously Lamar, Mark Andrews, you're going to be looking at J.K. Dobbins, going to be, perhaps propelling. I mean, he's still a couple years out, but even with Brown, you knew you weren't going to sign him. You knew he was gone. So at best you were getting a third round pick for him. So I guess, they did the best they could, but I definitely understand the trepidation. And now we're the ones rolling the dice. So, but that's really what the draft is. And the Ravens have been very good at rolling those dice. So I'll take our chances.
Yeah. So with that, the Ravens do pick up some more picks in this draft. So as I mentioned, they started with pick number 27, pick number 58, when we're talking about the top level picks. Right now they're going to have pick number 27, 31, and then 2 picks in the third round, 94, which they got from the Chiefs. 104 is their compensatory pick. And then they also picked up a 4th rounder from the Chiefs, pick number 131. They had 4th round pick number 136, 2 picks in the 5th, and a 6th round pick. No 7th round pick this year. But another one of those things. 1, 2, 3, 4 picks in the first 2 days. After the 4th round, things get a little bit dicey. But 6 picks in the top 136 picks in the draft. If you figure that 32 teams, that's, I don't know, what's 32 times 6 would be 192 on the fly, something like that. I think that is right. Yeah, I did that without even a calculator. Yeah, you can witness that.
Nice work. Nice work.
Yeah, so 192 picks. The Ravens are going to have 6 of those and only 136 instead of spread out over 192. So definitely some value they're going to have with these new picks that they've acquired. So With that, we want to focus most of our time tonight on what we're going to do is collaborate and build a little bit of a big board on the positions of need. You've seen, if you've listened to our recent podcast or followed us on the message board, the three biggest positions of need we think are wide receiver, edge rusher, offensive line. And offensive line can include tackle as well, because like we said, we didn't know what the Orlando Brown situation was going to bring. We don't know how long Villanueva will be here, what that contract will look like. If he signs here, a lot of this is hinging on that. He still hasn't officially signed. And then, so we're basically going to go down the list, starting with the guys at the top, just acknowledge them. And we're going to break it down into tiers. And then we're going to talk about, argue maybe for some guys where they should fall in the tiers among the other positions of need. And then at the end of the show, basically, hopefully have about 20, 25 names or so listed from top to bottom, split up into tiers that, we can cross off on draft night as we go along and see who's sitting there when 27 comes up, or if the Ravens shock everybody and actually trade up in this draft, who's sitting there and who they trade up to get and where they rank for us. So, Jamie, are you ready to jump into this?
Yeah, I'm actually really been trying to flesh out a scenario where they stay home and go at 27 and at 31. And it's just so dependent upon how everything shakes out ahead of them. Depending on particularly let's look at the edge. I think that's a good place to start because that's, I think, the most talked about because obviously with wide receiver, not that it's not a need, but with the signing of Sammy Watkins and with taking 4 wide receivers in the last 2 drafts, yes, wide receiver is still a position of need as far as a lot of fans and experts go. But as we know from this week or the last week or so, DaCosta and company has scoffed at the notion that our wide receivers aren't already good enough. So that could be, general manager, front office smokescreen, or that could be really how they feel about, and particularly about who Eric DaCosta has picked in his first 2 drafts. So with that in mind, I think when you're talking about edge, as much as we like some of the things about Kwity Paye from Michigan, I don't think there's a chance that I don't think he'll last till 27. Obviously you would have you got the Harbaugh connection there, and you've got he's an outstanding pass rusher, but I don't think he's going to make it to us. And I think you'd probably agree with that. I think that would be a move where if they liked him, they would have to try to move up to get him. And I don't know that he's that much better than the other guys that we have discussed and will discuss, that it's worth it to move up to go get him. What do you think?
Yeah, he's definitely in my tier, which I'll go over the tiers too here in a second. But he's definitely in my tier where the Ravens would have to trade up to get him, and also with all the hype he's getting about his explosion numbers, his agility that he's shown, the pro day he had, and now like more stories about his family history coming out. ESPN did like about a 20-minute long read on his family history. I mean, it's just incredible what this kid and his family had gone through. His family escaping the war-torn Liberia, and eventually making it to America through all kinds of channels, and getting here and what he had to go through and his upbringing and stuff like that. And it's wild and it's incredible. But all that stuff just makes me think, he's flying up the draft boards and is. He's the one guy that when you looked at mock drafts a couple weeks ago, Kwity Paye was anywhere from like 10 or 12, 13, all the way down. You see him at like 21, 22, 23 on some other guys. And now I feel like he's solidly in that like 10 to 12 and not going to go lower than that. But yeah, I feel like he's solidly up there with what he's done. And so I'll go over like a couple of the tiers real quick. So I listed some guys. The first tier I have is I just called it elite. These guys are never falling to the Ravens. They're not going to fall to a place where the Ravens can trade up to get them. And I put 4 names here. Sewell, the tackle from Oregon, obviously not falling. He's going to be a top 10 pick. We just want to acknowledge that these guys exist for the purpose of our big board. Football's
Right.
in his DNA. He's got two uncles in the NFL. It sounds like from everything I'm reading, Trevor Lawrence is a can't miss quarterback, and this guy's the other can't miss prospect in this draft. So he's off the board. Rashawn Slater from Northwestern. He played tackle and guard. He's basically the only tackle that gave Chase Young fits back in 2019. He gave him a hard time in their game. Every other game, Chase Young just dominated. So he's not falling to us either. Jamar Chase from LSU. I don't think he's not going to be there where we can trade up to get him. Physical, breaks a lot of tackles. Devonta Smith from Alabama. He's the best deep ball receiver in the draft. He's not going to fall, but honestly, he's pretty small for my taste at 175. We got some of those guys already. And when someone's the best deep ball receiver in the draft, that almost tells me that they fit a specific skill set. And Rashard Perryman was also one of the best deep ball threats in the draft at one point, and we saw how that turned out.
Yeah, we saw that worked out.
So he's in my elite tier because of what he's done on the field and where he's going to get drafted, and the fact that he's not going to fall to where the Ravens can trade up. Those are my four. Do you have anybody else that you want to put in that tier that the Ravens would not be able to conceivably trade up to get? Like they're going to be a top 12 pick?
Yeah, like you don't want to throw too many captain obviouses out there, but given the some of the discussions about tight end, of course, Kyle Pitts, he's going to be a top 10, maybe even a top 5 pick. For as great as it would be to have a pass catcher like that, obviously not in play. Jalen Waddle, in the same category, but again, a smallish wide receiver, another 5'10", about 180, 185, depending on where you look. But again, we have those guys, maybe not with the pedigree from Alabama, but nonetheless, I think those are guys that are just, completely not, even though they fit a position of need, but they're not going to be anywhere close. So it's like, enjoy your career wherever you go. It's not even worth talking about when it comes to the Ravens and draft with those guys.
Yeah. So I actually put Waddle in my tier 1. I feel like he might be the guy that falls down because to me, he's like a slot specialist where he's going to be like a Julian Edelman type kind of receiver. He doesn't look like the kind of guy that's going to play on the outside. So maybe teams might pass on them if that's not really a need for him. But I'd be all right with moving him up to the elite tier if you want to and take him out of tier 1.
Yeah, because I think it's one of those things where the way that slot receiver is looked at now too, because it's not what it used to be. It's not always a guy that is not going to be on the field a lot. I mean, the slot receiver, a lot of teams are running, 3 wide receiver sets as their base packages, and it's very possible that he's a guy that could get 35 snaps a game, 40 snaps a game, maybe depending on what team he goes to. So, given that, I think. And with the focus on passing games, and then especially how I guess you could say the spread type RPO concepts, those things, you need guys that can get open quickly in space, and I think he kind of fits that. So that's why I kind of pushed him up there, and especially seeing where he ranks amongst the wide receivers. He's mentioned there, right in that same breath with Chase and Devonta Smith. So that was but I completely see where you're coming from, where he might be a little bit below that quote unquote elite tier.
Yeah. Okay. So you would put Chase and Smith above Waddle. Would you put Chase above Smith?
Oh gosh,
or the physical breaking tackle, that kind of receiver.
It's one of it's so tough because I guess in a vacuum, I think I would put Chase above Smith. But then I think it depends on where they go, what style of offense, because certain things work in certain systems with certain teams and certain divisions. Like you hear, guys are tailor-made to play in the AFC North, or, guys are, made to play in this type of system. But I think just looking at it in a vacuum, I think I'd still put Jamar Chase at the top and then Devonta Smith just underneath him.
Okay. Would you put Chase over top either Sewell or Slater, the two?
See, it's not sexy, but I'm a big offensive line guy just because of what protection can do. And usually you only ever see tackles, which is interesting too, that like guards and centers generally never go high. Tackles, of course, are the big money position. But particularly with Rashawn Slater, with him having with him having versatility, obviously most of his value will be a tackle. But he's the type of guy that a team with like a veteran tackle could maybe take him and he could play inside a la Jonathan Ogden in 1996 and then eventually slide outside. I think tackles and, offensive line in particular can be a little bit safer than wide receiver. So if they are good enough to be in the top 10, I as a talent evaluator, would almost like to go offensive tackle before wide receiver. But that's just, Jamie, the podcaster, talent evaluator, not a professional. And of course, we know fans want to see skill position guys. They want to see guys that touch the football and, and score points on Sundays. And tackles don't do that. But tackles afford you the opportunity to do that. So I would this is just me. I would put him maybe slightly above. I would put the offensive lineman slightly above the wide receivers. But again, it depends on your need.
All right. So we got for our elite tier top 10 picks: Sewell, Slater, Chase, Smith, and Waddle. That's our top of the board. Ravens aren't going there. So let's move on to what we'll call tier 1, and this is where the Ravens could trade up to get some of these guys. Again, we're talking about wide receivers, offensive line, and edge rushers. So the list I have for tier 1 is Christian Darrisaw, the tackle from Virginia Tech. He's a Maryland high schooler. 0 quarterback hits allowed. Kwity Paye we talked about. Elijah Vera Tucker, he played guard for 2 years at USC and just kicked out to left tackle this year and did equally as good. Tevin Jenkins from Oklahoma State, great in run block. He's a great zone scheme fit. And Jalen Phillips at edge rusher. He was a 5-star recruit out of high school. Looks like a playmaker against the run and the pass. One of the knocks on him, he almost quit the game between UCLA and Miami. A little bit of an injury history with an ankle, concussions. He broke his wrist on in a moped accident. Little bit, injury history is something I think, some teams put a lot into, other teams not so much. They're not the type of things where you pull a hamstring 5 times a year. This is different. These are preventable. Not so much the concussion, I guess, but some of these other things are preventable injuries. We saw Stephon Diggs fall to the 5th round of the draft because he broke his leg a couple times, but those aren't soft tissue. These aren't injuries. Don't seem like that. So, all right, so I have the 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have these guys in tier 1, which is where the Ravens could trade up to get them. We can put these guys in order. I read them off in the order that I have them, that I would have them going, with Darrisaw and then Paye, and then Vera Tucker, then Jenkins, then Phillips. What do you think? Who's your out of those 5, like your top guy in tier 1? Would it be Kwity Paye? Right. Okay, so that was the order I had them in: Darrisaw, Paye, Vera Tucker, Jenkins, and then Phillips. Who for you, Jamie, would be the top of tier 1 out of those 5 guys? Would it be Kwity Paye?
Yeah, I think so. I just, you don't like to fall in love too much with pro days, at least, not me, but given the weirdness of, this past season with, so many guys opting out with short seasons, this, that, and the other, guys need an opportunity to, put their skills on display. You combine what he was able to show with the unbelievable story, and especially at a position of value, we're seeing the way that edge rushers are valued to the point where they're not called defensive ends anymore. They've really become their own thing. It's a little bit vague, but that's a reality, and they get paid commensurate to their value to teams because it is so important to get after the quarterback. So yeah, I definitely put him at the top. And yes, technically could they put a package together and trade up? Yeah, but I think that he could even go. I wouldn't even be surprised to see him go in the top 10 just because of the way the teams can panic on draft night. I think a lot of boards have him just outside the top 10, but yeah, he was definitely at the top of that tier 1 for me. And then with
Yeah.
regard
Okay.
to
So
offensive line, jumping over to we've got Darrisaw that played at Virginia Tech. I love the idea of the value of an offensive tackle in a position where you might be able to go get him and, good size, good reach. Because I think there was one thing that I was reading, and correct me if I'm wrong, there are a lot of guys in this year's draft that don't have long arms. Is that correct? In reading this,
yeah,
there's a lot of guys that were under 38 or
yeah,
36 or 38
was
inches of reach.
yeah. As I was going through the scouting reports on some tackles, there's more than usual some tackles they say would translate to a guard at the next level because of short arms or small hands or whatever, what have you.
Mm.
More than usual. There's always some, but I feel like more than usual, some of those guys were listed that way.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like there's. I feel like the way that you have them ranked pretty much hits where they would be, and I still feel like they're all just a little bit out of reach because I don't think that there's anyone in that group that necessarily moves the needle enough for the Ravens to be able to make a move up to get them. So you look at the guys that are in that tier one and you say, well, yes, they're good prospects, but what would we have to give up to get them? And then do they do enough to make us better? And given what else is at those positions, like we have a pretty decent group of edge rushers that sort of fall in just behind Kwity Paye. So I think that's okay to leave him there. As far as offensive line, I think they would be more inclined, especially since we're looking at a veteran tackle, especially since Ronnie Stanley appears to be healthy and is, locked in. I don't think the organization would look to go tackle that early. So that tier one, I think those guys are there, but I think they're unattainable is really what it comes down to.
Yeah,
You
no,
know?
no need to trade up to get a tackle. It looks like when there can be
Yeah.
others had in later rounds. I mean, Orlando Brown, for example, third round pick.
Right.
But,
Yeah, and
so
especially when you're talking about somebody who might end up being developmental in a manner of speaking, because they're going to sit behind a veteran in all likelihood. So you're not looking like it's like not you don't need a starter because there are guys out there that are capable.
sure, yeah. So we'll yes. Want to talk about then the three here real quick. Darrisaw, we just talked about Vera Tucker. One of the knocks on him, a little slow on pulling assignments. That's something the Ravens use a lot of pulling guards. Is that something you would knock him for on this big board since it's focused on Ravens needs?
Well, I
Like, would
mean,
you knock him down to tier two, which is going to be like where picks go in the 20 to 32 range, like end of the first round, or just on his talent alone, even without that knock? Do you think he's still going up there in like the top 15, 17, where the Ravens would have to trade up to get him?
I mean, because I think that it's another one of those things that's kind of system based. If you're a team that uses man blocking, or even a team that uses just more specific zone blocking, and doesn't do all of the pooling and the multiple pooling that we do in this really run heavy system. I think for the purposes of Ravens discussion, it's weird. Like, I guess he wouldn't be as valuable because he's not as good at that, and that's one of his, I guess, his weaker point. But even though that knocks him down, then you don't necessarily want to take him because he doesn't really excel at something that you like to do within your system. So, and I think this is where teams sometimes suffer because they take a guy and think, well, we'll make him fit into what we do, as opposed to taking a guy and accentuating what they do well, which the Ravens have gotten huge marks for doing with Lamar Jackson. They built a system around him. Now we have a system in place. Don't take an offensive lineman that doesn't fit that system. So it's kind of a dichotomy there in a way, because he's high on the board, but he wouldn't necessarily be high on my board because he doesn't do something that we do a lot of.
Okay. So
And
for that, we'll drop down Vera Tucker to the bottom of tier one, but keep him up there
mm,
because of his overall skill set.
mm,
And then, Jalen Phillips from Miami, the edge rusher, would you put him
mm.
above any of these offensive linemen, assuming he's the second best, our second favorite edge rusher behind Pay?
Yeah, it's funny that anytime you hear concussions, it scares me.
Yeah.
You almost put skill set aside, and especially with the way the NFL treats concussions now, and the way guys can be held out, and the way they're treated on game day, and then how you have to get back into games. And if he's had that long of or that problematic of an injury history with concussions, where do you balance that against the skill set? And like you said, injury history can be concerning depending on what it is. Concussions are one of those things that's very concerning. So I would have to say that I would probably put him a little bit above, maybe probably put him fourth in that tier, just for the simple fact that the injury history just scares me. That's really what it comes down to, and I would be gun shy because of that. If I was in the draft room this weekend, that would scare me.
Yeah, and the one we haven't talked really much about here is Tevin Jenkins. He's a zone scheme fit, so it sounds like we would put him above Phillips and above Vera Tucker because he would be a fit to what the Ravens would do if you're going to go
Yeah,
up there and trade up to get
yeah,
one of these guys.
yeah.
But
If you're saying we need a guy,
Quiddy Pay or above Quiddy Pay?
I'd have him just below Quiddy Pay, I think, because I
That's
just
where
think
I
that
have him too.
he could, yeah, Pay just seems pretty rock solid.
All right, cool. All right,
Mm.
so tier one, we have Darrisaw, tackle from Virginia Tech, Quiddy Pay, edge rusher from Michigan, Tevin Jenkins, tackle from Oklahoma State, Jalen Phillips, edge rusher out of Miami, and Elijah Vera Tucker, probably a guard, but played tackle at USC this past year, fifth in tier one. So those guys are the five from the elite tier and five from tier one. We expect all these guys to go in the top 20. Of course, tier one guys where the Ravens are going to have to trade up to get them. So now we're going to move down to tier two. And tier two is going to be a handful of names. Basically, it's almost like a best of the rest because if you
Mm.
start looking across mock drafts and scouting reports, basically everybody from number 20 down through the middle to end of second round of mock drafts, all these guys that we're going to talk about fall anywhere from like 20 to third round projections. So depending on the
Right.
publication and what
Mm.
that person saw in them. So these names are not necessarily going to be in any order. So why don't we go ahead and start with positions? Do you want to do wide receivers first, since that
Yeah,
was your special this
yeah,
offseason?
yeah. Let's hit wide receivers first. I think that's probably best, and that's obviously one that is, again, a frequent topic of conversation as we have, discussed many hours about the lack of production at wide receiver. For me, and I said this when wrote about it and I've talked about it. Even though his size isn't quite there, Rashad Bateman is the guy in that tier for me for wide receivers. I think he's just, he's got a little bit of dog in him. It looks like when you watch him play, he catches everything. He can play. He can play outside. He can slide inside to the slot. When he gets the ball in his hands, he can take off. And just had a solid year despite having he had a bout with COVID before the season, and he played a little light this year. So I think now getting past all that, it puts him in a position where I think that once you get past those top couple wide receivers that we discussed, I really think he's the best of the rest. He's a playmaker, and I like guys that can catch, and he does that a lot. So he's definitely a good one.
Yeah, I think I agree. He's the top wide receiver that could conceivably fall to 27 for me. He's got a basketball background, 36 broken tackles, so he's super physical. His Pro Football Focus, their scouting report compared him to Keenan Allen. I will
Mm,
gladly take Keenan Allen in with pick 27. Should
mm,
that be the case? So, um, yeah, he's
yeah.
the top wide receiver for me that could conceivably fall that far.
Yeah.
So some of the other names we have, Kadarius Toney, wide receiver from Florida. How do you feel about him?
Um, it's funny, and this is going to be almost irrelevant to the conversation, but I have to say this: I'm so gun shy about Florida wide receivers. I think it's like a hangover from like the Steve Spurrier era when those guys were putting up numbers and getting to the NFL and not really doing anything. I think it's one of those biases that you kind of have to get past. Um, but he is not a polished route runner at this point. That's one of those things that you don't necessarily love to hear, but at the same time, he had a ton of broken tackles. I think it was he had 43 broken tackles on his 120 catches. That's pretty impressive, especially for an offense like the Ravens offense that is going to work underneath. You're not going to have a ton of verticals, so guys will have to be operating in space, and it's good to have that toughness. But I think I would have him probably I think I would actually have him probably third of the four guys in this tier. Um, if we're going to jump to it, I'd have Terrace Marshall at the bottom of this tier. I know there are a ton of mocks that have him going to the Ravens. But then we had what was either today or yesterday. Somebody said that there was a source said that we were quote unquote out on Terrace Marshall. Now, again, that could be GM speak, front office smokescreen, but from a measurable standpoint, you like Terrace Marshall's size. He seems to be the perfect complement to what we already have, but he had some problems with drops this year, and I just there's something about him that I'm not quite over the moon about. I mean, he had a high percentage of his catches were touchdowns, so he gets in the end zone, but there's just something about him that has me a little bit nervous. I like Elijah Moore from Ole Miss. The fact that he had 73% contested catch rate, and that's something that we lack in this offense is that physicality. We're hoping Sammy Watkins is going to bring a little bit of that. But I think that's why what I like about Bateman, what I like about Moore is they both seem to play physical. They play big. And if I was going to rank them in order, I would go Bateman, Moore, Toney, then Marshall in that order for me.
Okay. Yeah, so we both agree on Bateman. I'm going to put Toney number 2
Okay.
on mine. Marshall, the same thing that bothers you bothers me because I heard the other day the word compared to the words I heard when they talked about him was focus drops. And every time I hear focus drops, I think Rashad Perryman. It's the second time we brought him up on this podcast now. And I remember it's like, oh, it's focus drops, like he'll be fine. Well, focus drops are drops.
Right.
Those are drops too. It's I don't know what the difference is between bad hands and focus drops. Focus drops are drops. Drops are all the same. So whether it's lack of focus or whether you have frying pans duct taped to your gloves, drops are drops. So that bothers me too. I also don't like his yards after catch for running from the slot is 6.4 yards after catch, which pales in comparison to Waddle as a slot guy who was at 10.1 yards after catch. Like I feel like you gotta be up there in that range when you're running these spread offenses and with not facing press coverage. 6.4 is kind of weak. And for me, talking about Elijah Moore, he's another slot guy that he's small, so I think the Ravens have enough small receivers. But he only notched 5.9 yards after catch from the slot.
Okay.
That's worse than Marshall to me. And maybe those things don't translate to the NFL. Maybe it's different. I'm not sure. I mean, different offenses, different teams, things like that. But so I had my wide receivers going Bateman, Toney, Marshall, then Moore.
Yeah,
I'm
in love with the contested catch thing. So.
Yeah, I'll bump Moore up over Marshall for that for
fair.
you.
That's fair.
But Toney, I feel like Toney's hands are really elite. He makes a lot of catches. It looked like from the tape I saw, not relying on his body to bring the ball in. He was plucking balls out of the air with his hands and not having to rely on his body, and that means a lot to me when I'm looking at wide receivers. So you want to split the difference on this, and we'll both agree Bateman 1, Marshall 4, and we'll split the difference and go Tony then Moore in the middle.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yep. Yeah, because it's
right.
at that point it's 2 and 2A, or vice versa. So yeah, that's fair. Yep.
Okay. So those are wide receivers. Next, we'll go into edge rushers. So in this group, we have. I'll read these off in the order that I'm sorry. No, this won't really be in a particular order. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, because
this is your specialty. Yeah.
Yeah. Gregory Rousseau from Miami. Jason Owe, edge rusher from Penn State. Zaven Collins. A lot of some mocks have him listed as an edge only in the NFL, but he played a little bit of everything at Tulsa, was the best defensive player in college football. So I put him on the edge list as well. And I think that's it. Oh, and Ronnie Perkins from Oklahoma in this list. And then there's also Joe Tryon and Carlos Basham, who, spoiler alert, I'm not going to talk much about them. They're at the bottom of my edge rusher list. But if we get to them, we'll assign them accordingly based on the other guys. But want to spend most of our time on Ojulari, Russo, Owe, and Collins, and Perkins.
That's fair.
Those 5 guys. So what I like about Ojulari, he's a team captain as a freshman, which is pretty rare. So coaches like what he brings to the table. He's experienced. He seems solid all around. Whether it's in pass rush or dropping into coverage, he's not one of these guys. It's just strictly going to be an edge rusher and nothing else. He can do other things. The one thing, the knock on him I have is he only has one pitch, essentially. He doesn't show a swim move or a spin move. It's like he comes off with his initial punch, and if he doesn't win, he could be neutralized. So he's got to develop something else. I feel like that could be coached up. When it comes to Russo, his 6'7" frame should excite a lot of people. He's got some really good closing speed on the quarterback. He was second in sacks in 2019, only behind Chase Young. But I worry that he got by in college on his size alone because his technique is not good. And I definitely wasn't impressed by any of his explosion numbers given his size. His vertical was only 30 inches. And Ryan Fitzpatrick, way back in the day at the Combine, had a 30.5-inch vertical. So if you're playing edge at Miami, you should be able to jump higher than Ryan Fitzpatrick. Just saying. So I feel like there's some bust potential there, just because of teams are going to get excited about having his 6'7" guy. He was a little quick, but is going to run into trouble at the next level. Jason Owe from Penn State. He's got a big motor, nonstop. He's going to try multiple moves to beat his opponent, but we've talked about this already. No sacks in 2020. What are they going to show on draft night? Here's a clip where he almost got a sack. I feel like maybe John Simon might be my comp for him. I understand John Simon's still in the league, but he's the guy the Ravens drafted because he was a gym rat and he had a high motor and was an every down player at Ohio State. He did nothing here. He was not effective at all as an edge rusher. But understand he's still in the league and doing okay for himself, just like Rashad Perriman's still in the league. That's 3. Right. If you're playing the drinking game, drink every time we mention Rashad Perriman, you're on your 3rd shot.
You would think the last thing we would want to do is mention Rashad Perriman when talking about a Ravens draft, but yet here we are. That was 4.
Here we are. You just said it, so that's 4. Yep, that's 4. And then we go to Zaven Collins. Talked about how decorated he is with his 2020 award wins, best defensive player in the NCAA, all around. He played inside backer, outside. He was a signal caller for them. I feel like he's quick with read and react, quick to find a hole, making tackles for loss. I just don't think on the edge specifically, if that's going to be his position, that he has that nasty streak to beat tackles consistently as an edge rusher and be one of these double-digit sack guys. But on a team like the Ravens, where Martindale will draw up schemes to have blitzes coming from anywhere, off the corner, up the middle, those fronts where they put 9 guys on the line and you have no idea who's dropping back or who's coming through. I feel like Collins would be a really good fit here, but I feel like on other teams, they could put him at edge rusher and just he'd get lost. So I feel like he's a fit here. I would kind of move him higher up on my big board for the Ravens, but I understand that maybe for other teams he could be easily misused. And then Ronnie Perkins is a guy that's not gonna go in the first round. It looks like, according to mocks, he was starting to sneak in there a couple weeks ago. But he's a guy, when I watched the video on him, he's just constantly in the backfield. He's in the backfield more than Russo, more than Phillips, more than Pay. He's in the backfield more than all of these guys. And the things the experts say he can't do, I don't know if they just seem meaningless to me, because I feel like some of these scouting reports read like they're just fishing for stuff. Like, oh, his hips are too narrow. Like, oh, who cares? Can he play? Does he get in his hips are too narrow didn't stop him from getting that sack or getting that tackle for loss, like more than every other person that we're talking about right now. So, but he did fail a drug test prior to college football playoff semifinal game that carried over into this year, the first 5 games of the season. So, I mean, smoking marijuana, that's been something that the NFL has decriminalized. They're lessening the punishments on that. But it's also one of those things, like, it's the biggest game of the year. What were you doing? Like, why would you put yourself in that situation? Right. But kids will be kids, as well. Yeah. So something some teams will want to interview him for and see how he responds. And some teams may look at that as a red flag and say, no, thanks. Could be the only reason why he falls out of the first round, and maybe goes second or third round. But somebody that I do like what he brings to the table. So, so if I'm ranking these edge rushers, I'm going Ojulari, then Collins, then Perkins, then Owe, then Russo. Any thoughts there?
Well, one of the things I'll say about around? Well, it's weird. Like, I really like Ronnie Perkins a lot, for the simple fact that he's the only guy at the edge position that graded out over 90 for Pro Football Focus in both run and pass defense. And with how multiple we are on defense, and you think about, and you go back to Terrell Suggs and think about how he was always talked about as a pass rusher, but how outstanding he was at setting the edge and how good he was against the run. And he never really got enough credit for that, maybe outside of Baltimore, for just how good of an all-around defender he was. And for as much as we need a guy that can put his hand in the dirt and get after the quarterback, that's just not something that this defense really does. And I think that's why we saw oh my gosh, from Jacksonville that we traded for, and I'm drawing a blank. Good gracious. The defensive end we traded for. Oh, God, thank you. Ngakoue. I just drew a blank. Sorry about that. Like, you saw him kind of almost not fit here. Like, it just seemed like it didn't quite work. And I feel like we really value those guys that are multiple in that regard. So I like Perkins a lot, but he's not a guy that, as you said, he's been kind of mocked in the early mid-second round. So maybe if that's a guy that you do like, that if you decide to trade out of the first round with one of those picks, that he's still there, you can go get. With all that said, what has this defense been desperately lacking? The ability to get to the quarterback without scheming up an exotic blitz, this, that, and the other. With that in mind, with the players that we're talking about, I'd have Owe at the bottom. I can't get past a guy that didn't have any sacks, and that's your edge rusher. I just think that's a tough sell. Like you said, flashes up on draft night, and there are no highlights of him taking the quarterback down with the ball in his hands. I think of those guys, Ojulari is probably our best bet. Especially if we stay at 27, I think he's the top of that group here, because he's got a great move. And I think especially if you bring in a veteran pass rusher, or you can coach him up, he can work on a swim move. He can work on a spin move. Those are things that I think that can be developed. So I really like how you have those guys ranked out. I think you did a great job. You nailed it. I don't really have much more to add, except for the fact that I like Perkins a lot. And I feel like he's a type of player that the Ravens like a lot.
Yeah. All right. So we'll do Ojulari, Collins, Perkins, Russo, then Owe. I know we're going to get blowback on the Perkins pick, but you know what? We like him. We like him. What are you going to say?
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
Yeah. I don't care that his hips are narrow.
Yeah, right.
Not worried
Yeah,
about that.
right.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go ahead and before we get into the offensive linemen in this group, which is going to include the interior offensive line, which we know that is a need for the Ravens. Let's try to mix and match these 4 receivers and 5 edge rushers into some kind of list, and then we'll quickly go through the offensive linemen and plug them in where we see fit. So, would you put Bateman, the wide receiver from Minnesota, above Ojulari? If you had to pick your choice of wide receiver or edge rusher, are you taking Ojulari or Bateman?
Because of lack of depth and positional need, and I hate to draft for need, but let's call it what it is. I'm putting Ojulari above Bateman. That's a
Okay.
tough one for me because I really like Bateman, but
I know.
yeah,
I
I'm
like
putting
him a lot.
Ojulari up top. Yeah.
All right, so we'll go Ojulari there, and then Bateman. And then are we going Ojulari, then Collins, or are we going Ojulari, Bateman, and then so Bateman solid number 2?
I think Bateman's solid number 2. Yeah, definitely
Okay.
for me.
And then
Yeah.
are we going to go Kadarius Toney or Zaven Collins?
I think we'd go Collins because, again, I think that's another guy who is a quote unquote multiple type player, somebody that could work in this system, that could do a couple of different things. And again, it's a need. And I think it's a bigger need than wide receiver at this point.
Sure. And then we're going to go with after Collins. Are we going to go Kadarius Toney or are we going to go Ronnie Perkins?
You know, I might get some heat for this, but I think I like Ronnie Perkins there because I'm telling you, I think there's something about he lives in the backfield. I like that. I mean, I don't necessarily want to see him get picked at 27, just given what else is going on. But that's a coin flip for me. But you know what? Screw it. Let's go big. I like Perkins just a little bit ahead of Kadarius Toney.
Okay, I kind of like Toney a little bit more.
That's fine. That's fair.
Just because the hands alone. I mean, catch radius, it's got me.
Yeah,
More than Perkins. So let's go with Toney then Perkins, and then now we're down to the 4 guys we don't like. So are we going to go after Perkins, Elijah Moore or Gregory Rousseau?
I think I think we got to go. I think we'll go Russo for the simple fact that, again, I think that edge is more important for this team to address at this point than wide receiver. So I'd put him above Elijah Moore.
Okay, and then are we going Elijah Moore or Jason Owe?
Oh gosh, it's funny. God, I'm really conflicted on Owe because you watch him. He has that motor and he's relentless. But is he relentless because he doesn't get there the first time? And is giving chase because he's not quite good enough to get home? I'm gonna drop Owe down. Let's put
okay. So Elijah Moore.
Yeah.
And then who wins the battle here? Is it going to be Owe or Terrace Marshall? Terrace Marshall.
Let's go Owe. Yeah, the drops. I just see. Dare I say it? Brashad Perryman. Look at Terrace Marshall.
Shot number 5. All right.
5.
So so we'll do Jason Owe on top of Terrace Marshall. Okay, so now let's get into some of the offensive linemen, and we'll try to run through these pretty quickly, as we're coming up on almost an hour of show here. Yeah. So some of the guys I have listed, some of these guys are going to be interior offensive linemen as well. I think 1 or 2 of them are just plain tackles. Landon Dickerson from Alabama, he's consensus the best center in the draft. One of the red flags, suffered 2 torn ACLs so far in his career. Creed Humphrey from Oklahoma, played 3 seasons at center, can kick out to guard, they think, or kicked out to guard as well. 0 sacks allowed and 2 quarterback hits allowed in 3 seasons as a center with Oklahoma. Lots of experience, played almost 2,500 snaps there. So you got to like that experience. Alex Leatherwood, from Alabama, he's a guard for a year and then kicked out the left tackle for 2 years. Top 3 offensive line recruit out of high school. He's a better run blocker than a pass blocker, though. So you could, I think, fit him in at right guard, which could be a need for this team. And hopefully, maybe he's the next Marshall Yanda for this team if they go in that direction. Also, could, I think, versatile enough to play right tackle too, but definitely wouldn't be our left tackle on this team. Samuel Cosme, the tackle from Texas, he played both tackle positions well, right and left, pretty even at both. Looks like a natural athlete when he plays. He also caught a pass for a touchdown where he basically looked like a tight end. Also, fun fact: his favorite player growing up. Want to take a guess who it was?
Jonathan Ogden.
Close. Ray Lewis.
Oh.
He played.
There we
Wore
go.
number 52 in high school for that reason, apparently.
Oh, no kidding. I heard caught a pass, and I saw shades of J.O. pulling in a touchdown in St. Louis, I think.
Right.
Right.
And then another name coming up a lot is Liam Eichenberg from tackle from and guard from Notre Dame. And then Jalen Mayfield, tackle from Michigan. He seems to be slipping quite a bit in mocks, though. So we don't really have to get into him too much if you don't want to. But his measurables, basically slipping for one of the reasons you mentioned. Not great measurables, short arms, small hands, inexperienced. Why don't we just go ahead and actually just pull him off the list?
Okay.
So let's talk about Cosme, Leatherwood, Creed Humphrey, and Landon Dickerson. Instead of going into too much depth, maybe we just put these guys, fit these guys in our list. So we'll start with Dickerson and Humphrey, the two guys that we would consider centers. Do you want to put one above the other?
I think I would put Dickerson above Humphrey, even despite the injuries. First of all, you love the pedigree from Alabama. And when you see that somebody would be like a top 20, top 25 player, if not for, the ACL, that's a thing you really can't do much about. And it's not like that's a mistake you made, it's an ACL. It happens. And I mean, as much as I have railed against rookie centers, especially with a team that's kind of ready to compete. Obviously the guys played on the biggest stage in college. So, and considering center's a position in need, and maybe you don't want to move Bozeman, I would put him a little bit above Humphrey, although you love the fact that a guy that didn't give up a sack no matter where he played. That's pretty impressive. So this is kind of a 1 and 1A for me. But I think if dollars to donuts, I would put Landon Dickerson just above Creed Humphrey.
Okay.
In that grouping. Yeah.
And then if we're gonna say Alex Leatherwood and call him our right guard, if he gets called as a guard on draft night, would you want Leatherwood as your right guard above Dickerson or Humphrey? In the middle?
Well, you absolutely. Let's put it that he mauls in the running game. I mean, and that's something that this organization would love to have on the interior line. I don't think he's a guy that'll be able to play tackle at the next level, at least not on a regular basis, just because he seems to have trouble with quick guys around the edge and getting set. I think I would probably put him. I think he would fall maybe just below Creed Humphrey. But I wouldn't be upset because he could slide outside in a pinch, and you do like to have that versatility. So, another Alabama guy.
Yeah, and then I think Cosme maybe after Leatherwood, because he is going to be a tackle, and it's not quite a need for us.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, although it's
a need but not a glaring.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea because you are going to need, even if you sign a Villanueva or, veteran right tackle, your choice, you're going to need somebody, but you don't necessarily want to address that early unless you think he's somebody that can play inside. And it really just depends on how they're going to want to juggle the offensive line. Are they really serious about moving Bozeman over inside? And then, so you're not looking at center. So then that drops, the guys who are, that drops center kind of down your list if you're going to move Bozeman. So I guess it's just a lot of moving parts on how things fall. But I think if we're gonna do them 1, 2, 3, 4, I think let's go. I like keeping Bozeman at guard, even though I think that the organization might like moving him to center. I think I would go Dickerson, Humphrey, Leatherwood, and then Cosme.
Okay. So here we go. Dickerson as your center. Would you go above Ojulari
No.
as the top of tier 2?
Yeah. No, I would not.
No. Okay.
No,
So
I
Ojulari
would.
is still 1. We're gonna say Bateman still 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And then would you put Dickerson over Zaven Collins?
Oh gosh. No, I put him just below him, but above Kadarius Toney.
But above Tony? Okay.
Yeah.
I can certainly live with that because
Okay.
God, if we address center, that'd be just great after what we watched
Yeah.
last year.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then Tony. So Creed Humphrey before Tony as well, or is Dickerson that much better that you'd rather go Tony before Humphrey?
I think I'd have Humphrey just a little bit over Tony also. Like I mean, I get what you're saying, but I think with wide receiver, I'm so trepidatious about wide receiver. I just don't have any
Yeah, I
confidence
get
that we're
it.
going to do it until we do it.
Yeah. I don't think I want to put Leatherwood above Tony.
No,
So can we go Tony
no.
then Leatherwood, or do you want to go Tony Perkins Leatherwood?
I would put Leatherwood underneath Ronnie Perkins. I think
But
that
above Russo.
he's my, but above Russo. Yeah, Perkins is my
I
sleeper.
agree with that too.
He's yeah.
Yeah, I agree with the pedigree where he comes from and his versatility and the the fact that he can slide into right guard. He's got experience there. I
Yeah.
think that could be big, better than what maybe Russo might bring to the table. Chris is not going to
Yeah.
like this podcast because he's very high on Russo.
Oh, well. Well, that's okay. Hey, if we all thought the same thing all the time, it wouldn't be any fun.
Exactly. So after
Yeah.
Russo, so then Cosme from Texas, below Russo,
I,
above Elijah Moore, or below, above Russo as well.
I think I'd have Cosme a little bit towards the bottom just for the simple fact that we're not desperately in need of addressing the outside of the offensive line. So I think that
Below
unless
Marshall,
he's just nah, I put him above Marshall. Definitely put him above Marshall.
but
And maybe above Owe.
is the need.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, he's somewhere but he's definitely towards the bottom of that tier for me.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So we got yeah. That's I think that's our list. Unless you have any notes on Eichenberg, I really didn't get around. He's the last guy I wanted to
Yeah.
really look at, and I didn't get around to it. I know he was picked to go in the second round to us from Mel Kiper in his 2-round mock draft, but I
Okay.
really don't have any notes on him because
Yeah.
there
And
were plenty of
does
guys, and he was the last one on my list, and I just plain didn't get to
yeah,
him.
right. Yeah, that's fair. And doesn't Kuiper have some ties? Didn't he have some ties to Notre Dame or something?
Oh, he
At
he
one
loves
point,
Notre Dame
or he
guys, I
just
think.
loves Notre Dame. Yeah, because he always talks about Notre Dame guys. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, I just had one thing. Now this kind of gets outside of the tiers. I just had one kind of a third, sort of a third round sleeper.
Yeah.
Sage Surratt, wide receiver from Wake Forest.
Okay.
He opted out, but 6'3". He comps to Des Bryant was one of the comps that I heard, and just a guy that will go get the ball. He's great at high pointing the ball, 50-50 balls he's going to come up with, and I think that's a value that you can kind of get, later on day 2, and it complements what we have. So I think that's a guy that to keep an eye on in the third round, that if he's still around, which I think he very well could be. So that was just a name that stuck out when I was looking at the wide receivers that I didn't really get to mention any other time that I wanted to bring up. So something to consider.
No, for sure. One of those guys when it comes to sleepers, I wanted to bring up, and I'm not even sure if he's still considered a sleeper. But Quinn Miners, the center from Wisconsin Whitewater, the Division III school. It's just one of those things that he had a big showing at the
Mhm.
Senior Bowl, and that vaulted his name up into the onto the draft boards, and where he's going to go, I'm not sure. I know being Division III doesn't speak much to the talent he played against, and so the teams really only have the Senior Bowl to go off of when it comes to comparing him to D1 guys.
Mhm.
But you look at some of the guys the Ravens have taken chances on: Brandon Williams, Missouri Valley State, Matt Judon played Division
Mhm.
II, and say what you
Grand
will
Valley
about him.
State. Yeah.
Quite a good, Grand Valley State, quite a good role player for the Ravens. Better than a role player for the 4 or 5 years he gave us. So certainly,
And lest we
a
forget
good,
Joseph Vincent Flacco from Division I AA.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
the
we,
Ravens
we
aren't going to take these guys from places that aren't Power 5 conferences, that aren't even close to the G5 conferences, that are in completely different divisions altogether. So, just a name that I'll be most interested to see what team takes a chance on the Q3 center, and wonder if it'll be the Ravens, and because of their history of scouring every inch of the planet to find somebody, no matter where they play ball. All right, let's go down our list one more time to wrap up the show. I think that would wrap up our show, right? I think then.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, how about let's do this. Let's wrap it up. Put on your Eric DaCosta hat. It's Thursday night. It is. You are now on the clock at 27. What card are you turning in?
Sewell, if he's still there. No, I'm just kidding.
Well,
No, at 37, if that takes us to tier 2, assuming all our tier 1 guys are gone. It's going to be. I would take Ojulari because of the edge guy, the edge need that we have. If not him, then Bateman. He's my favorite wide receiver in this draft. That's not Jamar Chase, obviously. And even Devonta Smith still, I know he's going to get drafted way up the board, but too small for my taste. For the Ravens have those guys. But yeah, so Rashad Bateman is my favorite one that could fall down there. So at 27, I would go Ojulari, then Bateman, if I had to.
Yeah,
I
think
I kind of want to see it play out. I mean, they made the trade for these picks. I'd almost like to see us take a couple of these, like a third and a fourth, and maybe even move up from 27 and get somebody at that bottom of the first tier, like Jalen Phillips. Like if Pay's off the board, if he's like 12, 13, 14, it's too high. But if Jalen Phillips is hanging around like 18, 19, and the Ravens can get up there by trading pick 94 and 131 or something to move up 8, 9, 10 spots, something like that. If they can make that work, and jump up and get Jalen Phillips, that's what I'd really like to see in return for for stockpiling these picks. The ability to move up and get somebody you want, not the ability to take 31 and go down later in the second round and acquire more picks to take a guy that you could have got at 31 and still get him at 38. Like, that's nice to do, but it's not as exciting as going up to get the guy you really want.
Yeah, that's fair. And there is something to seeing the your team's emblem pop up on the screen. I mean, I know it's corny, but it is kind of exciting, and that they're going up to get somebody.
Super exciting. When they traded up to get Lamar Jackson, that was the most exciting end of a first round of a draft I've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, it was because it was funny. It was talked about, but it almost came out of left field because once it got to the end, you're like, oh, okay. And then you're like, what do you mean the Ravens traded? What happened? And then, boom, it happened. Yeah, I think that's one of those things where it's fun to talk about, but I just don't feel like that's in DaCosta's DNA to do unless it was just something where, like you said, for some reason, if Kwity Paye falls and it's 15 and he still hasn't been picked yet, maybe that's a time where something like that happens. I'm just not sure that there's anybody that they're really geared up to move up for. And I have a hard time believing that the organization won't pick somebody in the second round, that they're willing to let the entire second round go and not pick. That's why I said before the Orlando Brown trade happened that I thought they would trade out of 27 to acquire more picks in general. But now that they don't have a second round pick, I absolutely think 31 is getting traded to someone. And then that way they can take Ronnie Perkins in the second round. Boom.
There you go. and that's and that's where I'm going to split what ended up being tier 2 when we did this outline. We're going to make tier 3 start with Ronnie Perkins, which is basically the guys now that we have a pick at 27 and 31, instead of just 27. And if they want to use 31 as a late first round trade back, early second round pick, tier 3 will start with Ronnie Perkins as our top pick to be that guy, to be taken with our second pick in the draft, whether it be a 31 or a little bit farther back.
Mm-hmm.
So
we'll
go down the list. So our elite tier is Sewell, Slater, Chase, Smith, Waddle. Pretty standard. Tier 1 guys where the Ravens are going to have to trade way up to get, or they're going to have to fall way down. Darisaw, Kwity Paye, Tevin Jenkins, Oklahoma State tackle, Jalen Phillips, Elijah Vera Tucker. Tier 2, these are the guys that are probably going to be in the Ravens' wheelhouse at 27 or a little earlier. Azeez Ojulari, Rashad Bateman, Zaven Collins, Landon Dickerson, Creed Humphrey, Kadarius Toney. And tier 3 will start with, like I said, Ronnie Perkins at pick 31 or in the high 30s starting the second round. Ronnie Perkins, Alex Leatherwood, Gregory Rousseau, Elijah Moore, Jason Owe, Samuel Cosme, and Terrace Marshall to round out our wide receiver, offensive line, edge rusher, big board. How's that sound?
Mm-hmm. That sounds good. And then all this, and they're going to take the safety from TCU after we did all this.
Yep, exactly. They're going to take Maureen. They're going to trade back and then take a tight end with their second pick.
Right.
So we're going to cross all these names off, and the Ravens will end up with none of them. So that'll be great, right? All right. Yeah. So the year I started doing some serious scouting reports for BSL, one of the off seasons where I had plenty of free time before having kids and getting married and all that stuff. I must have done maybe 15 or so guys at positions of need and guys I really liked. And out of 15 or 20 of these reports, they end up drafting CJ Mosley, which I had no notes on. So,
right. It's remarkable, isn't it? For as much
Yeah.
information is out there, it's like we don't do 1/100% of the work that these organizations do. It's remarkable.
Not even close. Even close. I would love to be a fly on the wall in the Ravens war room in the first round, just to hear the conversations and just see like what the board looks like. And I feel like that'd be just a lot of fun.
Yeah. I can guarantee you one thing: whoever they pick on Thursday night, if they do pick, he was the top guy on their board.
Yeah, he was a red guy the whole time. He's the guy they wanted all along. Absolutely.
Right. Yep.
So, oh man, good times. Thanks for hanging out for an hour with me, Jamie.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, man.
So, anything else before we check out of here?
Yeah, Rashad Perriman. That's all.
That's it. Making a 6-pack. All right.
Yes, sir.
All right. Jamie Seek, I'm Mike Randall. This is the Bank Podcast.